Good morning, friends. Welcome to my channel. My name's Justin. I play guitar on songs in Nashville. I have a tiny bit of a head cold. You probably hear it in my voice. I also have a new mug. I have a new channel brand logo thing, and wow, that's really hot. If you want to support the channel, which I would greatly appreciate, maybe a mug. Maybe a mug. It's a good idea. There are some other things in the old JO store. You'll probably see them right below the video. So anyway, let's get right into it. I wanted to talk about the last video. There were a lot of comments and they were so great. Like, so many people were happy and agreed with what I was saying. Other people were like, well, I don't know about that. It's still the way that you're trying to not think of it. I get all that. That's fine. I do think I didn't very clearly communicate some of the things in the last video, which probably added to some of the confusion. It seemed like there was very little confusion, really. But let's go through some of those comments, and we'll just see what we've got here. Okay, here's one from Drifter Garage 4898. If what you're playing works over a chord progression, then you're using modes regardless of whether you realize it or not. Whether or not someone's paying you, and regardless of whether you can make it as a session player in Nashville or anywhere else, learning something about music theory won't hurt you and will likely make you a better player and improviser, even if only to understand how to play with other musicians. That's fair. All types of music use scales, and a mode is just a scale. Agreed. Yeah, that's what I said in the video. I defined it as starting and stopping a scale somewhere other than its root, right? So if you're in the key of G and you play all the notes of the key of G major from A to A, you're playing the A Dorian mode, and so on. All types of music use scales, and a mode is just a scale. Unfortunately, the way in which they're traditionally taught tends to lead to the type of aversion that Justin and many other players experience at some point. 100%. Don't use it as an excuse not to learn, though. Yeah, I don't think that's what I was saying in the last video. Yeah, do me a favor, everybody. Pause this video, go to Google, type in Dorian mode guitar, just those 3 words, and see what comes up. Search images, and what you're going to find is the Dorian mode box on the fretboard in root position. Do the same thing for Phrygian mode. It's going to come up the same way. So I think that there's this, I guess what I was kind of saying is that a lot of the instructional literature for guitar out there tends to conflate those 2 things. That is part of what turned me off to it. But also, I guess I was making several points that all kind of were somewhat related at the same time. I don't have a script or anything. This is just kind of all off the top of my head. So I guess what my main point was in the last video was that when I think in terms of the framework that everything works in, the scale, or a mode of that scale, what comes out tends to sound like that framework. If I think in terms of melodies, which to me are based on chord tones and how notes interact with the underlying chords, melodies tend to come out. You know what I mean? I have a very, what do I want to say? I have a very expressive way of playing guitar, you know? I don't just play a note and then hold it. Like, both my hands are constantly doing all sorts of things. I'm either muting some strings, I'm slurring into notes, whether that's a slide or a hammer-on or some kind of ghost note or a pre-bend or a vibrato. All of that is meant for me to kind of sound like a human voice, you know? And I don't want to tell people to not learn things, you know? The entire point for me is that thinking about this stuff in terms of that framework held me back from where I wanted to go, right? And where I wanted to go was playing things that are compelling to other people in the same way that the music that I like is compelling to me and makes them sort of lean in a little bit, you know? It kind of catches their ear. And I'm sorry, but most guitar Most improvisation-based guitar music out there does not do that at all for me. And that's very subjective, and I totally get that. Maybe it does it for you, you know? Maybe all the music you listen to is extremely improvisation-based. That's fine. Like, some of my favorite musicians live in that world, but it's very few of them that I actually really get into and find really compelling, you know? And also, I think that what I was saying is really not that controversial. There are multiple musicians who have been very vocal about the fact that, like, it's all chord tones, people. It's all chord tones. Pat Metheny, when he was teaching at Berkeley, that's like, he was a stickler for that, you know? And he's also said in other interviews that he kind of thinks of everything in terms of triads and uses arpeggios to get around the fretboard. That's a really good way to put it. That's kind of more what I'm thinking about. So like, all these comments like this, like, you're using them whether you know it or not. Well, if that's the framework that you think of everything in, then yeah, you're going to see it that way. And I'm not denying the existence of that framework. I'm just saying that the idea that I can pick a scale and then play around in that scale and land on certain target notes, I feel like I can hear that a mile away. In my own playing, for sure, but in other people's playing as well, I feel like I can hear that you're exploring that space, you know. One other commenter said that using modes creates a scaffolding. Now I know what's right and what's not right to play over certain chords or whatever. And I think that's pretty fair. But again, my response to that would be, when I think of the scaffolding comes out. And maybe I'm not as practiced of a guitar player as everybody might think. Maybe that's the problem. I never got over the hump, you know? There was another comment here that said, anything that's complex is going to feel like you're doing math until you practice it enough to get good at it. Absolutely. Absolutely. 100% agreed. He ended the comment with saying, this is art and we all have to choose with what we like and don't like and where we want to go. And that's exactly right. I think that's kind of what I was saying, you know? If where I was trying to go was being the guy who can play 20 minutes worth of so what changes and never run out of things to say, then I would absolutely be someone who would dive as deep as possible into more modal thinking, you know? I used to play those songs in college, and I was kind of like, okay, we got 16 bars on one chord, and then we go up a half step for 8 bars, and then we go back down to that same chord, and that's the song. And don't get me wrong, when it's Miles Davis doing it, or John Coltrane, or Monk, or whatever, like, yeah, that's pretty cool. But I just remember thinking in college, like, this is not exactly what I want to do. You know, I enrolled in a few jazz combos and one of the big bands at Kansas State, where I went to school. And I would say that I learned quite a bit. You know, I was not a jazz guy. I had grown up on Zeppelin and Stevie Ray Vaughan, and then I heard my first Pat Metheny record going into college, and he just sort of blew me away with his melodicism and pocket. It was the Trio record, and I think it was the really slow version of Giant Steps on his Trio Live. I think that's right. That song, I think it's on that record. I might be wrong about that, but his version of that at a slow tempo is just incredible. Incredible. And again, there's a guy who thinks in terms of triads and moves around in arpeggios and is not thinking modally at all. And he's not denying that those exist. He's not saying, nope, that's not real. Don't use that. That doesn't make sense. He's just like, you know, things sound better when I get inside the changes and really focus on chord tones and create melodies using the chord tones. I think that's harder than picking a framework and just knowing what notes are safe to land on within that framework. It's subtle for sure. Let's read some more comments. Here's one. Dominic Hudson, 79. I understand both points being made. This is in response to my pinned comment, and I'll get to the first point that I made there because it was in response to a comment from another guy that I think is actually a really dangerous way of thinking and potentially a little bit offensive, actually. I try to take everything with a grain of salt, so, you know, let's read Dominic's comment. This is not offensive. I understand your point, but isn't it a big stretch to say that you don't want to hear math in music when modern country music is so full of cliches based entirely on the number of any given chord? Of course, everybody wants to free their mind and play from the heart, but you guys are under pressure, banging out songs on the clock, and you employ a number system and the common phrases, cliches, devices associated with it to get the job done. I can see how it looks like that from the outside, and I can see how you listen to the radio and you think, wow, this is all very similar. When you're tracking on a song and the aim for it is to get it on the radio and get it up the chart and ring the bell, you have to hold these two things in tension. One being your stuff has to sound like a hit, right? The parts you're playing, the song itself, it has to have that sound. And there's a particular sound that songs that get on the radio and go up the charts have. There's a particular style, and that's a moving target over time, you know, and you see it over the decades. We talk about 90s country having a format, outlaw country. Modern country has a few different kinds of formats because it's pulling from all these different worlds. There's like the R&B country, you know, there's extreme pop country where you're really not hearing very many actual instruments. You're hearing a pop track that was built in the box and someone singing over it that has kind of a Georgia drawl or something. At this point, that's enough to anchor it in Nashville. And I know that's probably nobody's favorite music who watches this channel. But there's different, we're throwing back to some of those other genres I mentioned earlier. And so you kind of have to know what the target is, but you have to play something fresh enough to get the call, right? Or to get called back. And that to me is this sort of forward thinking. Like we have to be able to imagine what the track sounds like. We have to be able to imagine like, okay, this sounds like the next logical step from what is currently a hit on the radio. This sounds like it could be the next big single. And so much of what we do is sort of aimed in that direction. And it's an industry, right? It's people doing their job, trying to make money. And there's a tension between the art and the commerce of it, right? So you have to play things that are familiar and have a radio sound while also being forward thinking enough and doing something fresh enough to where people are like, hey, that made me lean in. And so, like I was saying, that's the place where I wanted to go. And I got there, right? So it's not that we are forced into this formulaic thing. It's that the format is pretty simple and we're trying to play what is the next big thing when we cut a record. And I think it's a bunch of subtle things all kind of put together. I hope that makes sense. So I'm going to try to find this comment where this guy said something crazy here. Okay, here it is. There are so many comments. I've been scrolling for a long time. Thank you for all the thoughtful comments, by the way. It's really great. So this is Zenland Zipline. He says, this guy is one of those naturally talented players. If he wasn't, he wouldn't be a top first call studio guy. Some people don't have that natural ear, brain, hand connection. For people who weren't born with natural ability, using modes and the circle of fifths and any kind of educational material really helps. I get what Justin is saying, think about the chords, and that's good advice, but there's a whole lot more going on with this guy's playing than just playing to the chords. He's hearing and feeling music on a different level than most. But it's hard for somebody like him to understand where somebody who doesn't have that natural ability is coming from and the struggle. That's the really offensive part. It would be like a person with normal vision telling a blind person, just open your eyes. Can't you see it? No, they don't see it because they don't have the ability to see it no matter how wide they open their eyes. It's hard to explain to those with talent. I need some guidance. I need to think about it. My fingers won't just go to the right notes automatically, as if mine do. Because my brain isn't synced up to my ears and my hands in a rhythmic and harmonic way that yours is. Look at Wes Montgomery for a great example of somebody with natural ability who just plays easily with the chords. I like this Justin guy, and I like his videos, and Guthrie and Bukovac, but these guys were born with a natural ability to play music. That could not be farther from the truth. It just could not be further, not farther. And then he says something that kind of negates the hard work and hours of playing and practicing combined with that natural ability puts them at the top. And it might be difficult for guys like that to understand the plight of the guy who has average or below average ability. Okay, it's a dangerous mindset because it's defeatist. It just sounds defeatist from the very get-go. And I have zero natural ability, natural inclination with music. I'm the first person in my entire family to go beyond playing piano for a few years as a kid. And really what it boiled down to was that my dad bought me a guitar when I was 12 or 13, and my home life was so dysfunctional, I stayed in my room playing that guitar. Like that was it. That's all I did. Like I played soccer and basketball. Once I got a guitar, all of that just stopped. It just stopped. And my parents let me, I mean, they were focused on other issues. We'll just say that. And so this kind of thinking, saying like, oh, well, he's just naturally good, you know, you can't get that unless you have that natural ability. I think that is extremely wrong, extremely wrong. There's something that literally every person in this town will tell you, and it's that hard work beats talent every time, every single time. Your measure of talent might put you 10 feet ahead at the starting line. I mean, this isn't pro basketball we're talking about, right? Like some people, like to even enter that world, you've got to be 6'5" minimum, right? And you've got to work as hard as you can. But, you know, you can't say that then every person who is that height has a natural ability to do that. It's the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of focused practice. Because what you're doing is wiring your brain. Everybody has the ability to wire their brains and become the best version of themselves at a particular task. That's what I think is dangerous about this mindset, because you are immediately crossing that off the table. You're just saying, nope, never going to happen. I don't know how many times I got so frustrated trying to figure something out on the guitar, and I would just give up, like for a day or so, and then I would come back. And I mean, I did that, I don't know how many times. I don't know how many 10,000s of hours I've put into this. Like I have kind of fat, medium, short-fingered hands, like kind of thick, short hands, right? There's nothing about me that's physically remarkable that puts me at an advantage. It's literally only the hours. And maybe I had an inclination toward it. And I teach my kids this all the time. Like, look, you enjoy doing that thing because you're good at it. But that's like 5% of the way to go. Like, you can take that so much farther. You can run with that and never run out of things to learn, no matter what you do. And it's usually the people who everybody else perceives as the best at what they do who say, yeah, the more I learn, the more I realize, like, I just don't know. Like, I don't think your life is long enough to completely exhaust any topic or activity or musical instrument or whatever to where you've just mastered it and you get to the end. Like, we never get to the end. That's kind of amazing about life, right? So my point with my kids is there's going to be a time, no matter what you enjoy right now and what you're good at, there's going to come a time where getting better is just going to be hard. And anybody who is actually great at something has pushed through that. It's that simple. And again, it goes back to wiring your brain. You know, you have to put in the hours of practice. Well, what does your hour of practice actually look like? Is it practicing something that is helpful to get you to go where you want to go? It's got to be focused practice, you know? It's not just random, like, okay, I'm clocked in and I sat here and played things that I'm already good at for an hour and I'm going to do that again tomorrow. You're never going to grow, right? I completely reject the idea that I have some sort of natural ability that just made this sort of effortless for me. Not true at all. And it's borderline offensive because I spent my entire teenage years being incredibly frustrated at what I could not do on the guitar. I still can't do certain things on the guitar. And some things, you know, what it looks like is a bunch of focused practice with tiny breakthroughs that happen just when you are about to, like, call it quits for good. And then the ball advances down the field like a yard. And then you keep going. And then you get this other little yard, you know. I'll end with this. People wildly overestimate what they think they should be able to do in a short amount of time, and they wildly underestimate what they can do over a long time. Like having a long-term goal that you reach, that's one of the most fulfilling things that you can do as a human being, that gives you a sense of self-worth and dignity and agency. And saying, like, if you have a guitar, even if it's cheap, even if it's a piece of junk, and you practice, like, there is so much free stuff everywhere. I used to check books out from the library. That's where I saw a lot of this modal things, like in root position, you know. Anyway, you can better yourself. It just requires focus, you know, and it requires hours. And you know, Guthrie and Tom have put in more hours than most people I know. Tom told me this a few years ago, back when he was like the guy playing on literally every record. He would tell me he would have triples 6 days a week, okay? A triple in the studio is a 10, 2, and a 6. 10 to 1, 2 to 5, 6 to 9. He was working those hours 6 days a week, and he would come home and practice guitar till like 1 or 2 in the morning. He's like, man, I've got a sickness. I've got a sickness. And look at the way he plays. I mean, look at the endless stream of information that he can put out, the stuff that he's absorbed, the coordination in his hands. Like, I'm at the point now with 3 kids and a wife, like, I'm not going to shut them out of my life to the extent that I'm going to be playing guitar from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. every day, you know. I'm tempering my own expectations for how much I'm going to grow at this point. You know what I mean? But it's hours. It's focused hours that get you where you want to go. That is it. I don't want other people to read that comment and think, oh yeah, well, might as well not try, you know. And some people took my video that way, like, oh, well, you don't like these modal things, you didn't push through, so don't learn them. And that's not what I'm saying at all. Keep learning. Just learn things that help you get where you want to go, right? So, hey, buy my mug. Help me buy my kids Christmas presents. And please subscribe. And thanks once again for all your comments on the last video. I really hope that this is doing y'all a lot of good. I will see you later. Thanks.